Alright, so I'm playing with some little ideas for the little bench. Sorry, just turning that speaker a little bit. So I've got everything fit. Everything's mostly cleaned up. So I cleaned it up a little bit just so it was a little bit easier to mark on. So what I'm thinking about doing is I have this arch in the bottom, a couple straight edges here. Once that's done, I'm going to wind up doing almost like a little clover type pattern here in the middle. What I'll wind up doing is when I'm ready to cut all this, I'm going to attach it to this other one so that they're both together. What I've got is I'm using this double stick tape. It's called spec tape, S-P-E-C-T-A-P-E. One of the better double stick tapes that I've come across. So I've got a couple pieces here. They're pretty much ready to go. Also going to do a shallow arch on the sides. I'll show you how I lay that out. I've marked my sort of middle points, and keep in mind this middle point is between the bottom and the very end of the tail for the top. So it's from foot to the very top of the top. So this is a flexible batten. I've got just a string on here, kind of like a sliding hitch here, double half hitch. I can slide up and down. I'll put a center mark on it. So now what I can do is line that center. Do it this way. It's easier to see on this side. So I'm basically lining up my center mark with the center mark I put here, and the two ends, and just tracing that sort of arch. So it's going to be fairly subtle. I'm not looking for anything too dramatic. So do the same thing on this side. No, bugger, come on, see where you are. All right. Close enough. Alright. Another thing I didn't, I described to you guys when we're doing this in class, but here's my stretcher. So I've got my arches for my cuts for my wedges done, and here down at the bottom I drilled a little 1/8 inch hole. What that 1/8 inch hole allows to happen is as I drive that wedge in, it stops any sort of crack from propagating down here inside my shoulder. If I don't have that, we have a potential for this board to split further down into this area, and I want to avoid that. I want to have this spread apart precisely where I want it to, and that's right here at the edge. So, and I did that on both sides. I'm going to show you how to cut the wedges in a little bit. For now, let me pause this. I'm going to go to the bandsaw. I think first I'll go to the drill press, drill these 3 holes. Then I'll go to the bandsaw and cut those. You've seen this before, so I don't think it's necessary to videotape this. Again, on the drill press, I'll go down until the point of my Forstner bit just protrudes out of the very bottom of this board. Again, I'm taping this one to this one. So I want that point just to barely come out, and then I'll flip it over and drill from the inside, and I'll go to my little bandsaw and wind up cutting those arches out. And then I'll show you how we do a little more shaping. So hold on. All right, so got part of this done, but didn't quite come out like I wanted to. You can see my little clover leaf here got a little mangled. So what I'm going to try to do is clean that up a little bit, even it up. So let's see, I can see this side I definitely need to square up. I'm basically just going to take the handsaw and clean up this edge. And I got to even it out sort of on this side. So yeah, I wanted that opening there to be only about 1/8 of an inch, but that's not happening. So yeah, I think it just got with this with open poured wood. It's just and I got a real thin piece there, so I'm kind of short graining this, so it's not behaving quite as well as I would like. Alright, so now I still got some rough parts in there, so we have a number of different tools. So these are cheap little riffler files. I mean, you've got sort of different shapes, different coarsenesses on each of these. I think I got those just at Harbor Freight, so I'm not opposed to buying things at Harbor Freight. But with this, I can get in here and clean up some of these fibers that my Forstner bit didn't clean too well, or didn't cut cleanly. So I think that Forstner bit was just a little on the dull side. So I know now I need to replace a half-inch Forstner bit. So clean that up a little bit. So this is a different rasp. Let me back off a little bit here. So this one is an RRRC rasp. It's a French company sold by Lee Nielsen. I think this puppy's, I don't know, 100, 120 bucks. What makes it so expensive is machine cut rasps, they tend to have all their teeth cut at sort of an even pattern. That makes the rasp a little difficult to sort of keep control of. If they're all cut sort of at a random pattern, sort of cut by hand, which is the case in this one, it cuts a lot better. So since all these little teeth are all set by hand, that's what makes this thing particularly expensive. My intent has been to buy more of these, but since they are like 120 bucks, I've got this one. One of these days I will probably buy another, but for now, this is going to be it. Need to sell a few more pieces of furniture before I can justify one of these, or some more of these. So, all right, so that's looking a little bit better. Last thing I could do is for cleaning up this hollow hole. So I've got some cutoffs from my belt sander. Let me grab something and I'll show you something here. So this box is a box of sandpaper I bought from Klingspor, and here you can kind of see the name. This is the smaller other boxes. I think they call this one a 10-pound box. And what I've got here is just tons and tons of different grits from different types of belt sanders. I think they charge like $5, maybe 10 bucks for the sandpaper. It might be $1 a pound or something. Whatever. Pretty cheap. But it gives you a whole lot of sandpaper that you're going to wind up making cutoffs and really getting into these tight areas. I'm also going to be using a fair bit of that sandpaper for the daily loom. So, alright. So again, not nearly as clean as I would have liked that to come out, but we'll sort of have to just deal with it. Alrighty. So now what I'm going to wind up doing is cleaning up this bottom. And I've got several choices. There's some rough spots here. If I take this rasp, angle it, I can smooth those areas out. And the rasp, like a file, only cuts in one direction, so it doesn't really do any good to bring it, drag it back. But that'll eventually clean that up. I can take my random warp sander, and this is a low enough arch. If I'm careful, that way as well. If you have a spindle sander, that would work. I don't have one. What I do occasionally is I have these set of little small drums that I can put on my drill press. So I can chuck those in the drill press and use that. You want to be careful doing this long term. A drill press, it's engineered to go down. So if you keep pushing on that spindle sideways, that creates an undue wear on that drill press. So if you were to regularly use your drill press as a sort of a spindle sander, it'll eventually wear out that spindle and or the chuck, and you're gonna have to replace those. So let me go over to the side on this thing, and let me show you how I can clean up some of the side. So what you have here is a couple spoke shaves, and a spoke shave is basically just a blade held in. This one's got a rounded silver sole, this one has a flat sole. It's just a cutting tool, just a very short, maybe wide blade, and both of these have these knurled knobs at the top that I can wind up adjusting the depth of cut with. Lee Nielsen has one made, they call it the Brian Boggs spoke shave. Basically you tap it back and forth. It is a much nicer spoke shave than these. I think it just cuts absolutely beautiful. Even though it doesn't have these typical depth adjustments like I'm adjusting here, it cuts much nicer than these, or at least in my opinion, it cuts much nicer than these. So I'm just going to get this thing adjusted so I can get a decent cut. Still not yet. And I'm trying to keep the blade exposed evenly on the bottom. Okay, now we're getting some shavings. So what I want to do is I want to cut from the high point down. So you can see the grain going across here. I want to cut downhill or with the grain. If I cut from the center up, I'm going to have that blade dig into these fibers here, and it's going to tear out. So again, I want to always cut downhill to the best of my ability. Obviously when I get to the very center there, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. Okay. So that'll work for that. So what I can also do, this is called a draw knife. A draw knife will also allow me to cut angle pieces or curved pieces. It takes a little more skill and finesse, which I haven't entirely mastered yet, to work a draw knife really well. But that allows me to smooth out that as well. So let's say, for example, I wanted to just cut a chamfer on this edge. I can use any of those tools that I showed you. This one is called a scorp. I can use this one as well. And scorp is more traditionally meant for chair making. But I can ride that edge really well. And it cuts quickly, which is good and bad. I can get to where I want relatively quickly. I can also like things that go quick. I can mess it up in a hurry. So now I've got a nice little chamfer on that. Now if I need to clean it up a little bit more, I can go back to my spoke shave. And again, that'll do it as well. I'm kind of liking the look of that, so I'll do that probably with the rest of the edges here. And as I have a couple of other sort of interesting planes. This is called a model maker's squirrel tail. The handle here almost looking like a squirrel tail. This one has convex sole this way, convex sole that way. So if I wanted to sort of cut a little bit of recess in here, I can get in there and cut a concave this way. This one does pretty much the same thing. This one's sold by Veritas or Lee Valley. This one's sold by Lee Nielsen. In fact, I bought these for gifts for a couple people. They've told me it's one of their favorite little planes. You don't use it a whole lot, but when you need something like that, it's really, really handy. So this one takes a lot of detail work. I mean, it's going to cut slowly, but now I can sort of cut some other slopes in there. So adds another sort of shadow line in there that creates a little more interest. So another option. This would be a real good violin or instrument maker's tool. So great for that as well. And if I want to sort of smooth those over, I can take some sandpaper to it. I'm going to go back to my squirrel tail to finish this up. What I particularly like is some of these facets. As long as I'm not getting a whole lot of tear out, I think those facets really sort of lend a nice touch to it. It kind of gives you the indication that this was a handmade piece rather than a piece made by machine. And that's kind of a nice sort of touch to it. I mean, you can feel this and you can tell it's not perfect, but it's sort of part of the charm for that. So I'm just getting a little bit of tear out with my squirrel tail, so I'll just clean this up with the spoke shave. Oh, one last tool I could use if, for example, for my holes here, or if I want to clean it up, this is carving gouge. And again, I can take something like this, ride that bevel, and create that that sort of slope as well. So, lots of tools to be able to use to sort of create different textures, different shapes, different facets. You know, sort of create a little bit more interest there. And you know, you can't see it right now. The lighting here isn't particularly great, but and once this is all together, those facets will create a nice little shadow line, create a little more visual interest to the piece. So that's about it. So what I'm going to wind up doing is I'll wind up continuing shaping this stuff. I'll do another quick video on how to cut the wedges, and then another video on sort of a good sort of approach, sort of order of operations to get this thing glued up. So that's it for this one.